is our third event in the series on Palestine at Edgewood, the second Zoom event. Last week we focused on what the occupation means for Palestinians, particularly Palestinian children, which I think was just a wonderful session. Tonight will be very different. Last time we had one wonderful leader for that session. This time we're doing a lot more variety of different kinds of things. The focus tonight is on solidarity with Palestine that comes from different perspectives, and trying to, explore some of those. And then we'll have a third Zoom session after the US election, a full week after November 11th, where we'll talk about, well, so what? About if we are in solidarity, what shall we do? So that will come next. And that one, we will have people from SUPER, which is the Michigan State University Students United for Palestinian Rights group. They're going to join us because they've been doing organizing for several years in our community. So I'm looking forward to that. I wanted to start with some cultural expression. So I've got some paintings by Palestinian artists, all done this year in 2020, and also a song that I want to bring, which we're only going to listen to the lyric, we're only going to read lyrics at the beginning. So I'm going to switch to my PowerPoint in order to share these paintings. I learned this week for the first time that there is a museum in Washington, DC called, can everybody see now? Let me see, I'm still not on the slide. Okay, now I'm on the slide. The Museum of the Palestinian People in Washington, DC. I didn't know it existed. And the exhibit that was finished just recently is called Palestinian and African American Art for Social Justice. And I thought, well, this is pretty fabulous. It's really what we're interested in, because one of the things that I've been inspired by is the links that have been strengthened in the last couple of years between Black Americans and Palestinians. And this is, very much expressed in this exhibit as well. So I'll just go very quickly. This artist, I do not speak Arabic, so I do not know how to pronounce these names, for which I apologize. Malak Matar, who in May did this painting of George Floyd. This is the artist. She grew up in Gaza. She's 20. She's now a student in Turkey. And here are several more of her paintings, all of them done this year. Probably you recognize the Gustav Klimt inspiration, but this is about an image of Palestinian refugees. This is a tribute to Iyad al-Hallaq, and we will see a very different version, image of this same person who was killed May 30th by Israeli police, and I'll explain a little bit more later. Notice that the figure is holding a flower. This is a Palestinian born in Raleigh, North Carolina, who's living in DC, who made this marvelous poster kind of image of John Lewis, Mr. Good Trouble. This is another image of Iyad al-Hallaq, even a different spelling of his name, that tells a little of the story. This is a close-up of a mural, I believe, or maybe it's just made to look like a mural. This is a man who was autistic, who went to a school for students with special needs, and every day he walked past a Israeli Defense Force base. And the person who walked with him, he was very scared. It was a whole process of his being able to walk past this every day to get to school. And the person helping him introduced him to the soldiers and said he was safe. And then the coronavirus hit and the school closed. And then when he could go back to school after the school reopened, he walked past and was shot and killed. And he was carrying a plant.
Mm. Wow.
So Palestinians give us the ability to be aware of Palestinians who are suffering in this way, just as we are aware of Black Americans who are being shot for no reason. Then there is a muralist who's one of the best known muralists. He's based in Bethlehem. This muralist did this painting. His name is Taki Spatin. And here we've got a picture of him. Is that the same? Yeah, that's the same one. This is a picture of him painting it. He is one of the most well-known muralists in the West Bank. The West Bank is known for murals because it's got this wall, this long wall. So that becomes a place artists use. So this is another, this George Floyd mural is by this same artist. And in the West Bank, George Floyd is in the company of two other people. The woman in the red scarf was a 20-year-old medic in Gaza who was shot and killed by the Israeli Defense Forces I think it was in 2018. And then I am missing my note. Oh, here we go. Yes, she was killed in June 2018. And this person here is 16 years old. Her name is Ahed Tamimi, who is an activist in the occupied West Bank. She was detained by Israeli Defense Force people in December of 2017. She lives there with her family. Her brother had already been detained. Her parents, her family was just, and her people in her community were mistreated by Israeli Defense Force people all the time. And she slapped a soldier. And that got her 8 months in detention. So I love the company these people are keeping. She is still alive. These two people were killed, but Ahed is still alive and still resisting. And then this is Shireen Damra, a Palestinian born and raised in Chicago, is how she describes herself. This is, of course, Ahmed Abry from Georgia, and an image of support for Black Lives Matter. And here is the artist. And then this is quite lovely. Back to Malak Matar. This is in memory of a young man who was killed by the Israeli Defense Force people on the way to his sister's wedding. So here we have a dove in the shape of a mask needed for COVID of the bride whose wedding he didn't get to. So I find those very moving images, and I'm grateful to be able to see them. Oh dear. The music that I wanted to share, I tried to share it earlier this morning, and it doesn't work well through Zoom. Are any of you already familiar with Freedom for Palestine, this song that was produced in 2011?
No.
Are you familiar with Free Nelson Mandela, that song from 1984? It goes way back. It was it was sung on a huge outdoor stage in London. Anyway, there's this group called One World, which is musicians mostly out of the UK who do major international solidarity cultural songs. They have one now of solidarity among people in Africa fighting the virus. And so they created this Freedom for Palestine, which I urge you to listen to on YouTube after this event. But when you hear it, it's a wonderful upbeat song, and it's one of these composites with a lot of different musicians in different places, including a choir in Durban, South Africa. It's not easy to hear the lyrics, but it's a great song. I did want to share some of the lyrics with you because it says so much in such an efficient and moving way. So many years of catastrophe, more than 6 million refugees. It could be you and your family, forced from your home and your history. We are the people, and this is the time. Stand up, sing out for Palestine. And then the chorus, will break down the wall, freedom for Palestine. Demand justice for all, freedom for Palestine. 2 more verses. No matter your faith or community, this is a crime against humanity. Gaza turned into a prison camp. Apartheid wall divides the West Bank. Enough illegal occupation, violence, and racial segregation. All religious communities unite. Freedom is a human right. So I hope you'll get the audio version later. Before they published this, before they produced it, they got a video from Bishop Desmond Tutu in South Africa, in which he said, in South Africa, we could not have achieved our freedom without the help of people around the world, and musicians are central to our struggle. Through music and art, we speak to a common humanity, one which transcends political and economic interests. Does this speak to you, this lyric? Anybody?
Yes, very powerful.
Uh-huh.
Hi, welcome, Jay.
Thank you.
Is there anything in particular that anybody relates to in it?
The 6 million people kind of harking back to the Jews who were killed in Germany.
Yeah.
Can't hear.
Can't hear.
Who's speaking?
I don't know.
I think it's Judy.
No,
Judy?
wasn't me.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
I said that about the Jews, but then we heard somebody speaking from the distance.
Yeah, it sounded very far away.
Hi, Paul.
There.
If you can maybe get closer to your mic.
I think it's somebody not trying to break in here, but speaking in the background.
I think that's right, yeah.
Okay, maybe.
Maybe it's my wife is on in another room on another Zoom.
Okay.
So
Well,
maybe,
we won't try to hear her then.
I'll move so that we're
Don't worry. Don't worry.
Okay.
I wanted to share it because it's so basic. You know, it really is. We have a common humanity.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't take anything more complex than that, and yet also bringing forth the history and the particulars makes it more powerful to understand what experience these people are going through. Yeah, Connie.
Yeah, Jim and I had the opportunity to go to Israel and Palestine a few years ago, 2 or 3 years ago. And So we were with a Disciples of Christ pastor who and his wife who have been activists for Palestine for years. And so what we saw of Israel and Palestine is not the typical tour group view. We saw a fair amount in Palestine. We stayed in Bethlehem, which is in the West Bank, which is Palestine. And we only stayed one night, maybe, in Israel, actually. All the other, well, no. Only one night in the Israeli side of Jerusalem. But then we did go up to the north around the Sea of Galilee. And so that's Israel. But you know, what I wanted to get at was that when we had the chance to visit a refugee camp, and that was just a very sobering experience. We were asked not to peer inside people's homes. If somebody's door opened up, please don't peer inside. And I mean, I didn't really know what they were getting at. You know, what would we see inside if we were to peer? But it happened that somebody's door did open, and I wasn't trying to peer, but I just saw there were like 6 or 8 people seated in the entryway in the home. And I mean, I don't know what to make of that. Is it that these people are so packed together in these homes in this refugee camp that they're left to just sitting packed side by side in the entryway of the home? I really don't know.
Well, that's what we were told.
But that's what we gathered, was there were just a ton of people in each dwelling, and that's what we saw. And we saw these walls, you know, with these murals like you showed, Chris, and you know, the murals expressed the anger and the hurt and the dismay and the long-standing horror of this situation for the people in Palestine. And so I'm intrigued that this is being connected to the United States Black Lives Matter movement. Mm-hmm. Seems to make a lot of sense, really.
Yeah.
So I'm appreciative for your program, your series on Palestine, because, you know, before we went there, I didn't know much about it. And I mean, I keep up with the news, sort of. My husband keeps up with the news incredibly. And I didn't know much about Palestine. So, I mean, it doesn't make it into the news media. And, you know, the power structure is behind the Israeli government, right? And the way that they're doing things now. And so the people that we were touring with said that they were, I mean, I'm talking about this Disciples of Christ pastor and his wife who were leading our group, said that they were pro-Palestine, pro-Israel. You know, I mean, they positioned themselves as being neutral. That's not the story that we typically get. We get the pro-Israeli government story. So,
but that's you know, that's a question that always is at the front of my mind. If you look at when South Africa we were fighting apartheid in South Africa, there was so much universal support for getting rid of apartheid. So what is it about Israel? Is that if we attack Israel for what it's doing to the Palestinians, which is just like apartheid, that we're anti-Semitic? Or what is it that makes, I mean, the two are so parallel in what the two countries are doing to the minority community, but so much support for getting rid of apartheid and so little support for getting rid of what's happening to the Palestinians. So you've done a lot of reading, Chris. What?
I suggest we postpone that a little bit. We're going to listen to about 12 minutes of somebody talking about the history of solidarity between Black Americans and Palestinians. And then Heidi is going to read for us some sections of Michelle Alexander, who talks about what it is to advocate for Palestine in the US context, which I think is what you're raising.
Okay.
That might give us some help. So maybe this would be a good time to go on to that presentation.
Sure.
I'm hoping that everything will go well. I'm going to go to my browser. Sorry. I need to intro this for you very briefly by sharing my screen with the PowerPoint again. Okay, so what I'm going to share is from a webinar organized by FoSNA, which is Friends of Sabeel in North America, which is a very vibrant, growing organization of Christians in the United States supporting the struggle for Palestine. And in May, they put on a webinar called Tied in a Single Garment of Destiny, which was specifically aimed at people in Black churches in the US. It was marvelous. It was an hour and a half, as you can see. And I asked the person whose face you can't see, Corey Peterson Smith, if he might be willing to join us tonight. And he said, I would love to, but I'm already on another Zoom meeting. But he said he would be perfectly happy for us to share the presentation he made on this occasion. And FoSNA also concurred, that they were happy to have us share it. So I wanted to let you know what the source is, that it was from this May, and that everybody has said they're happy for us to look at it. So now I'm going to try to start it. So can people see it?
Not yet.
No.
Oh,
No, can't see it.
Okay, I think
you're not sharing your screen there.
right. Sorry.
Okay.
All right.
No sound.
No sound?
Right.
You might have to go out and reshare it and make sure you click the box that says to share the optimized sound.
What did you say about optimize down?
When you choose to share your screen,
Yeah.
there's a little box you check about optimizing sound or share sound as well.
You think so, huh? Share computer sound. There it is. I needed your help.
Same thing with King, right? Which King are we lifting up? So I really just
Can you hear it now?
think what you gave
Yes.
us is rich.
Okay, this
We
is
can
a
think
little bit
about which
earlier in the
tradition
intro.
are we talking about? So thank you so much. Let's show a lot of love to Erica, y'all. Get in the chat box. She just offered us so much. And we're getting this thing started off right. So please hang with us. We now want to transition from the spirit of King to how did we get to where we are? I mean, this didn't just drop from the sky, there's a historical condition that got us here. So we want to bring Corey in, who's going to really talk about the history of Black Palestinian solidarity. So much we hear about this same time period that Erica spoke of, the relationship between Jewish activists and African-American civil rights leaders. And while that is an important history, oftentimes we don't hear about this other history that was happening at the same time of Black Palestinian solidarity. So Brother Corey, if you can come on and offer your food on the table, it's so rich already. We welcome you.
Thank you. This is a table, this is a feast that we're gathered around, and I'm so grateful to be here. I'm so grateful to my sister Erica for opening us up and setting us off right, and I'm so grateful for what's about to come. So what I would love to talk about tonight is really three things. When we think about the Black Palestine solidarity, I would argue that there's a long history of Black identification with and solidarity with Palestine. And I want to talk about it in three parts. The first is Palestine as a story. The second is Palestine as a place. And the third is Palestinians as a people, Palestine and Palestinians as a people. And those are all, of course, related, but they are all distinct. And if there's one thing that I want to get across tonight, it's that each of those things that Black folks have connected to, each of those histories, each of those living histories, because they're all alive today, are actually distinct from the modern nation state of Israel. Because the word Israel is a word that many Black people learn in the church. That's where I first heard the word Israel, which I'm going to talk about in a minute. But Israel, biblically, the story of the Israelites is something that's separate from the modern nation state of Israel. And so I want to get into that. I want to start by talking about the history of identification and solidarity among Black Americans with Palestine in terms of a story. And for that, if you'll allow me, I want to speak personally, because that story is a story that I came into in the Black church. I came up in the AME church, the African Methodist Episcopal Church, and the name of my church was Israel AME. Why? Why was it so important? Why was the story of the Israelites so important that my church was named after it? It's because that story that I learned, and that I'm sure many people on the call learned, is a story of a group of people, the Israelites, who were enslaved, in bondage, and then freed and made it to the promised land. And that story has an obvious resonance with the Black experience in this place, the idea that we could someday be free and make it to a promised land. And we know that the promised land is kind of a concept, but in the story of the Israelites, it was also a place that today is called Palestine, right? And so that's the first thing, is for a long time, long before Black Americans set foot in the place of Palestine, there was a calling to a connection through the story of Palestine, this location as a site of liberation, as we learned it in a biblical tradition, right? So that's the first thing. The second thing, though, is that there was a point at which Black Americans did start going to Palestine. And that actually happened. I mean, it was beautiful to hear the story, the detailed story. I haven't heard the details that Sister Erica went into of Dr. King's pilgrimage to Palestine. But in fact, he was not the first Black preacher to make a pilgrimage to Palestine. And as early as the 1800s, as the 19th century, there were actually Black clergy who were going, along with other clergy, other Christian clergy from the United States, were going to Palestine. Now, you know, what those pilgrimages looked like, I think we could have a whole conversation about. This is a time when Americans and Europeans are going to lots of places around the world in a way that I think is quite colonial, right? But there were times when Black American clergy would join these other clergy in these pilgrimages to Palestine. And again, we could talk about how cool or how colonial was that, but there was something that they saw and that they brought back to Black churches here in the United States, which is this place that we have heard of in this story is also a real place. It's an actual place. It's not just a metaphor, it is an actual place, this place that is called Palestine. So that therein lies a connection between Black Americans through the Christian church and Palestine, the place. And with that, I want to get into how we developed a history of solidarity and identification with Palestinian people, right? That comes, of course, after it comes in the context of what Sister Erica talked about, the oppression of Palestinian people, first and foremost, right? And people who were not only oppressed when the state of Israel was created, which was a process that culminated in what Israelis call their declaration and their war of independence in 1948, what Palestinians call the Nakba, the Great Catastrophe. That was really a war on this group of people who had been living in this place for many, many generations, and where a bunch of other people, Zionists, decided to establish a new state, a nation state called Israel, establish it in 1948, right? And again, I think it's important to point out that there's a history to the modern nation state of Israel, because there is one story that is told that says that the story of the ancient Israelites and the modern nation state of Israel are the same thing, that there is an unbroken line between that biblical experience and the modern nation state. But in fact, that state was established in 1948, okay? Even a century old. When it was established through a massive war, incredible violence against Palestinian people who were inhabiting that place, most of whom were expelled from their home and many of whom remain in that location. Well, Palestinians did not take this quietly. There was Palestinian resistance from the beginning, and particularly in the 1950s and 1960s especially, as the movement, as the Black freedom struggle in this country is heating up, that becomes a context for Black Americans in motion fighting for our freedom to connect with other people in motion around the world fighting for their freedom. And Palestinians played a very important role in what was a global era of decolonization and struggle for liberation. I wanna also refer to Dr. King. Sister Erica did it so well, went through that history so well, but to say that as he was organizing in the South and in this country, very much on his mind was what was happening elsewhere in the world. In 1963, when he is jailed in Birmingham, in his letter from Birmingham jail, he talks about how slow things are moving in this country, how long it is taking for us to achieve our freedom. And he says, our sisters and brothers in Asia and Latin America and Africa are moving with jet-like speed toward freedom, while we are moving at a horse and buggy pace to get a cup of coffee at a lunch counter in this country. So he is thinking not only of what's happening in Alabama, he is looking at what's happening all around the world as people who have been colonized are fighting for their freedom and saying, we're with them. We are all the same, right? So in that global struggle, Palestinians played a central role. And that is why organizations like the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, SNCC, declared solidarity with Palestinians. It is why Malcolm X declared solidarity with Palestinians. It is why the Black Panthers declared solidarity with Palestinians, and why there was really extensive engagement between the Black Panthers and Palestinian freedom organizations, the Palestinian Liberation Organization as well. So that was an era where the solidarity between Black people fighting for freedom here and Palestinians fighting for their liberation, that relationship of solidarity is cemented because it became clear that we are on the same side. And it became clear to many Black folks in this country that the folks here who are attacking us with water hoses, the people who run this government who are holding us down, they identified with Israel, right? So we knew who our friends were and we knew who our enemies were. I want to conclude this history by fast forwarding and saying, really, I think the next great chapter of Black Palestine solidarity is what we are living in today. We are in it right now. And so if you're new to it, welcome. Now is a wonderful time to join it. And this era, I think, really set off in 2014. Before 2014, people like Brother Cornel West, people like Sister Angela Davis, and other prominent Black intellectuals who identified with Palestine were calling attention to the oppression that Palestinians faced and trying to build solidarity. So they were doing that for many years. But the summer of 2014 was very special, because not only was it the summer when Israel was launching its latest war on the people of Gaza, it was also the summer where police in Ferguson, Missouri killed Michael Brown, and Ferguson rose up and we had the Ferguson uprising. And there was a point that summer where both those things were happening at the same time. You could turn on the news and watch Israeli jets bombing Gaza, and then the next minute see Black folks in Ferguson facing militarized police as we were fighting for our freedom here. And it is the case that there were Palestinians in Palestine who sent messages of solidarity saying, we are with you in Ferguson, who gave us instructions on Twitter about how to deal with tear gas because they know how to deal with tear gas in Palestine. There were Palestinians and Palestinian Americans in Ferguson on the ground from day one, marching with us as well. And since that uprising, there have been many more examples of Black folks going to Palestine on delegations, like what Sister Erica was talking about, and of Palestinians coming here as well to build solidarity. So I will conclude by saying that we have a rich history of this solidarity, and if you are new to it, welcome, come on in, and let's continue to build it as we all fight for our common liberation, because none of us are going to get free. We will not get free as Black folks here unless Palestinians get free, and vice versa. They will not get free unless we get free. We are in it together. So let's fight for our freedom together. Thank you.
So we're back.
Yeah,
What do you think of that contribution?
wonderful. Reminding me of, we talked about going from 19 to 2014 and 15 with Jeremiah Wright, with UCC, has been real strong with the battle with Palestine and the Proctor Conference that he was, when in Proctor Conference, he is the founder of, have sent people there with that sense of movement, at least since 2015. And one of the speakers there, I thought of this relationship to the idea of I'm being for Palestine and I'm for Israel. They said, I am for Palestine, I'm for Israel, but I'm against Zionists. And the nation state of Israel is really the Zionist state.
I think the whole idea of the oppression of Palestinians being as a result of settler colonialism is kind of a new concept to me, and not just with regard to Palestinians, but with regard to Native Americans.
Right.
Here and in Canada, it's like a whole new perspective and way of looking at the struggle of peoples who are being oppressed. That has really helped me to put it in a new context. And I think that's been very helpful. Some people, when they talk about Israel and Palestine, it's like, well, are you pro-Israel or are you pro-Palestine? And it's this divide. And I think I've learned from Cody O'Rourke, who has been here from the Church of the Brethren, and who's living in Palestine, the whole idea that what really it is about is oppression, and the people who are being oppressed predominantly are the Palestinians. They are not in a position of power. They live well. There are Palestinians in Israel, and there are Palestinians in the West Bank and Gaza, and to try and think of that as a country now is almost impossible, for me, is almost impossible because of the way it's been carved up through settler colonialism. So this whole thing of solidarity with African Americans, again, puts it in that broader context of peoples around the world who are being oppressed because there's other people in power who don't want to share their power and share their wealth, basically.
Heidi, maybe we could go on to Michelle Alexander's contribution from 2 years ago or so.
Yeah, this was from January 19th, 2019, from the New York Times. I'm just going to read parts of it. On April 4th, 1967, exactly 1 year before his assassination, the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. stepped up to the lectern at the Riverside Church in Manhattan. The United States had been in active combat in Vietnam for 2 years, and 10,000s of people had been killed, including some 10,000 American troops. The political establishment, from left to right, backed the war, and more than 400,000 American service members were in Vietnam, their lives on the line. King said, "I come to this magnificent house of worship tonight because my conscience leaves me no other choice." Quoting a statement by the clergy and laymen concerned about Vietnam, he said, "A time comes when silence is betrayal. That time has come for us in relation to Vietnam." It was a lonely moral stance, and it cost him. But it set an example of what is required of us if we are to honor our deepest values in times of crisis, even when silence would better serve our personal interests or the communities and causes we hold most dear. It's what I think about when I go over the excuses and rationalizations that have kept me largely silent on one of the great moral challenges of our time, the crisis in Israel, Palestine. Many civil rights activists and organizations have remained silent as well, not because they lack concern or sympathy for the Palestinian people, but because they fear loss of funding from foundations and false charges of anti-Semitism. They worry, as I once did, that their important social justice work will be compromised or discredited by smear campaigns. If we're to honor King's message, and not merely the man, we must condemn Israel's actions, unrelenting violations of international law, continued occupation of the West Bank, East Jerusalem, and Gaza, home demolitions and land confiscations. We must cry out at the treatment of Palestinians at checkpoints, the routine searches of their homes and restrictions on their movements, and the severely limited access to decent housing, schools, food, hospitals, and water that many of them face. Finally, we must, with as much courage and conviction as we can muster, speak out against the system of legal discrimination that exists inside Israel. A system complete with, according to ADLA, the Legal Center for Arab Minority Rights in Israel, more than 50 laws that discriminate against Palestinians, such as the new nation-state law that says explicitly that only Jewish Israelis have the right of self-determination in Israel, ignoring the rights of the Arab minority that makes up 21% of the population. And finally, in this new year, Michelle said, I am to speak with greater courage and conviction about injustices beyond our borders, particularly those that are funded by our government, and stand in solidarity with struggles for democracy and freedom. My conscience leaves me no other choice. That was from the New York Times.
Thank you, Heidi.
Thank you.
I remember, no, go ahead.
Sorry. That does remind me, though, of all the trouble that Jimmy Carter got in when he said that Palestine is apartheid.
I'd forgotten he'd said that.
Oh, yeah. He got in lots of trouble for that.
We had a United Nations Day celebration this weekend with the Detroit chapter they brought in to Andrew Young from Atlanta to give him the Ralph Bunche Award, which was very nice. And one of the things that Andrew Young reminded us of, which I think I didn't even know, was that during Jimmy Carter's presidency, there was not one American soldier killed in action overseas, and the American soldiers killed no one overseas during that period, which I'd never heard that statistic before.
Interesting. I think when I was young, I just remember reading all of those books about the establishment of Israel and thinking it was so wonderful for the Jews, you know, because we had heard so much about the Holocaust. And it's embarrassing to think we weren't thinking much about what was going on with the Palestinians at that time.
During the war, where the Palestinians were forced out, you know, you can talk about freedom fighters and you can talk about terrorists, right? And whether you're a freedom fighter or a terrorist depends upon whether you're on the winning side or not.
Yeah.
The other comment I want to make is, of course, the United States' greatest amount of foreign aid, which is predominantly military, goes first of all to Israel and then secondarily to Egypt. And that's a whole nother layer that's on this conflict, or that's part of this conflict, basically.
And now Kamala Harris's husband is Jewish. I wonder if that's going to impede any efforts to get justice for Palestine if they win.
Well, and
that Biden is not on the Palestinian side either. And if you read the Democratic Party platform, it's not encouraging on this.
No, that's right.
Not to say that that will turn my vote.
No, but
because the other side, huh?
But we need to turn him. That's for damn sure.
Well, we'll still have a lot of work cut out for us, no matter who's elected.
That's right.
No question. Even with our representative, Elissa Slotkin, who's chief administrative aide for foreign affairs issues in her Washington office, actually worked for a Jewish public relations firm in Belgium before joining Slotkin, who comes from a strong Jewish family in Detroit.
This is sort of a step backwards, but several of you have been discussing this problem with Jews here.
Sorry, Frank, can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
That's better.
Hear me now?
Yes.
All right. Several of you have been discussing the Israeli-Jewish, Arab, whatever problem with residents, Jews here in Lansing. I haven't heard the latest on this, but how do you find them defending Israel? What are their main reasons for defending Israel and not defending Israel, not Israelis, but Palestinians?
I don't want to put words in anybody's mouth. I mean, there is a very wide variety of views among American Jews on the issue of the state of Israel and on the issue of Zionism. And one of the things we're going to end with on this session is quoting from the Jewish Voice for Peace approach to Zionism, which I find really helpful. And as somebody who is, myself who is not Jewish, I think it's very helpful to hear people who are Jewish say there is a way to have a stance in support of people who are oppressed, as Paul is saying, that is not anti-Semitic. And to be able to listen deeply to Jews explaining that, I find really helpful. And it also gives me added courage, which is what, Heidi was reading about from Michelle Alexander, that even, those of us who have felt identification with Palestinians and felt a duty to be in solidarity with Palestinians, nevertheless, speaking for myself, I did not speak up as much as I should have. As Judy said, it's very easy to support the majority in South Africa. It's much more complicated in the United States to support Palestinians, but that's not an excuse. And I really gained from hearing from other people who are putting themselves out to do that. Whether it's Corey Peterson Smith, who we heard from on the tape, or people in Jewish Voice for Peace, coming from very different perspectives, but all of whom saying we must stand with the oppressed as a general notion and as a particular need at this moment in history.
And Chris, did you want to say a word about the chair of the local super chapter?
Well, let's wait until next time when they'll be with us.
Okay.
Are you referring, Dave, to the fact that there's a Jewish Voice for Peace member in the Students United for Palestinian Rights?
I think, is she the chair of super?
I think she is.
Yeah.
So we have in our, at MSU, a group of Palestinians, Palestinian Americans, and Jewish Americans who in this particular moment have selected a Jewish American as their chair. So real solidarity is possible.
Yeah, in the Poor People's Campaign in Detroit, the Jewish leadership there for the Michigan chapter of the Poor People's Campaign is very strong, pro-Palestinian and in the fight, and gets in trouble for being there.
Yeah.
So I appreciate that. So there are groups that are in the fight, and I feel like I should be in the fight more than I have been. So.
Well, maybe that's a good transition to the Kairos document and the efforts of groups like FoSNA to encourage American Christians to speak out on Palestine out of the Christian perspective and history. Does that sound okay? So Dave, we're transitioning to you.
Now for a friendly message from your Justice and Peace team. As Rachel would say, stay with us. Just want to point out that one of the places that Palestinians have been hurt is in Lebanon, where the explosion killed and wiped out the housing and the schools and the medical facilities for Palestinians. The people in Lebanon have been astonishing. They have opened their doors to refugees more than any other nation in the world. 1 in 6 Lebanese is a refugee, and even in spite of complaints of their people about loss of jobs. Many of them were hurt, and United Nations is trying to do something about it. So UNICEF and UNHCR are dealing with the problems of the Palestinians and other refugees injured in the explosion in Beirut. And just until November 7th, UNICEF is offering a 5 times match for any donations to deal with the crises that they're dealing with in Lesbos in Greece, where the refugees are piled up. There are many children, and Yemen and other places. So I'll share with you the address for that, but only till November 7th. You can help support the UNICEF and UNHCR in dealing with the crisis in Lebanon after the explosion. And now back to our program. Thank you. I want to say a little bit about the churches and oppression, which because it's a very interesting history. As Judy mentioned, we all have heard about the Holocaust in Europe, and one of the things that is interesting to remember is that out of in opposition to the Holocaust and the collecting of Jews to murder them, was a group of people who, after the war, helped to form the World Council of Churches. Bissertoff, Philippe Maury, a whole group of other local pastors in southern France who built a building and called it a refugee child center in order to hide Jews that were, and to secret them out to Switzerland. And so there was a group there that brought a kind of a radical tinge to what most of the churches were not doing across Africa, and especially in Germany, where, as you know, Dietrich Bonhoeffer was the one who is held up as who gave his life against the Nazi cause most clearly. So in his tradition, there, after Europe was rebuilt in the 1980s, the World Council of Churches and other ecumenical bodies, the World Alliance of Reformed Churches, the World Association of Lutheran Churches, and others, began to say, what is our responsibility for Christian ethical response to the crises of this world? And so we had developed a whole series of what came to be known as Kairos documents. The Kairos meaning a time of real crisis, but also of opportunity, is set there. And perhaps the strongest of those was the Accra Confession that the World Communion of Reformed Churches, which includes the United Church of Christ, by the way, developed to reading the signs of the times. And just to quote very briefly from it, the signs of the times have become more alarming and must be interpreted. The root causes of massive threats to life, above all, the product of an unjust economic system, defended and protected by political and military might. Economic systems are a matter of life and death. And then it goes on in the Accra Confession, which was signed on by the World Reformed Churches, of attacking unrestrained competition, consumerism, unlimited economic growth, and accumulation of wealth are allegedly the best thing for the world. Attacking the ownership of private property with no social obligations, attacking capital speculation, liberalization, and deregulation of the market, privatization of public utilities, and unrestricted movement of capital, and finally attacking the social obligations, protection of the poor and the weak, trade unions, and relationships between people are subordinate to the processes of economic growth and capital accumulation. So this document has had various impacts in various places. It's been institutionalized, best I know, in Canada, where there is a thing called Kairos Canada that especially is attentive to the destruction of ecosystems in the developing world, especially by Canadian mining companies, who are among the largest in the mining sector in the world and elsewhere. So in 2009, the Palestinians said, it's time to talk about the crisis and opportunity with Palestine. And so they developed a document called Kairos Palestine. It says, in this spirit of this document, we request the international community to stand by the Palestinian peoples who have faced oppression, displacement, suffering, and clear apartheid for more than 6 decades. The suffering continues while the international community silently looks on at the occupying of the state of Israel. Our word is a cry of hope. With love, prayer, and faith in God, we address them to stand against injustice and apartheid, urging them to work for a just peace in our region, calling on them to revisit theologies that justify crimes perpetrated against our people and the dispossession of the land. And they ended by saying, we hope also that it will be welcomed positively and will receive strong support, as was the South African Kairos document in 1985, which at that time proved to be the tool in the struggle against oppression and occupation. So the Palestinians sent this document to the World Council of Churches and church leaders around the world, signed by 15 Palestinian Christian leaders, Orthodox, Roman Catholic, and Protestant. And there actually was not a quick response in 2009 and until 2012. And you can Google and find the American pastoral response, which we can put that on our resources for you to see how the American response. But it was an 18-page document, and it was sort of more focused upon study and reflection than it was on action and responding to the call for joining in sanctions of Israel for what they were doing. So that was 2009. 2017, after 8 years, the Palestinians sort of, I think they're saying, well, what does it take to get your attention? In their open letter to the World Council of Churches and the Ecumenical Movement, the National Coalition of Christian Organizations in Palestine wrote, "Things are beyond urgent. We're on the verge of an catastrophic collapse. This is no time for shallow diplomacy, Christians." And so it was seeing what action there is. And there has been action in all of the major Protestant churches. I know in Paul's church, in the United Church of Christ, in the Methodist Church, Presbyterian Church, there are all agencies. In the case of UCC, it's the Palestine Israel Network, which you can, by the way, sign up, and urge you to do, to receive their information on the churches and on Palestine repression. That was 2017. So there's been some action, but there has not been a groundswell of action in a lot of churches, especially in local churches, for reasons that we've hinted at, in terms of the repression of those who speak out. But finally, in 2020, I think they're almost giving up. Then they say, "This is a cry of hope to our brothers and sisters throughout the world. We invite our fellow Christians, their local congregations, churches, and international ecumenical orgs to receive and respond to our common witness, to join the process of confessing and to initiate processes to formally reject the oppression of the Palestinian people and any use of the Bible to justify this injustice. And we ask you to commit to the following actions." And then just briefly, initiate processes at local, denominational, and ecumenical levels that present Kairos and the urgent requirement for decisive action regarding the denial of Palestinian rights and the misuse of the Bible. 2, to engage in study and discernment with respect to theologies and understandings of the Bible that have been used to justify oppression of the Palestinians. 3, to affirm the Palestinian right to resist the occupation, dispossession, and abrogation of their fundamental rights, and to join them in their creative and nonviolent resistance. The 2005 Palestinian call for boycott, divestment, and sanctions, BDS, provides a framework for economic, cultural, and academic measures for direct political advocacy as nonviolent means to end occupation and oppression. And the last 3, demand also that governments and world bodies employ political, diplomatic, and economic means to stop Israel's violation of human rights and international law. And here, note this one: oppose anti-Semitism by working for justice against anti-Judaism, racism, and xenophobia. Oppose the equating of criticism of Israel's unjust actions with anti-Semitism. To support between Israelis and Palestinians, interfaith partnerships that combat apartheid and occupation and create the opportunity to work together for a common future of mutual respect and dignity. And finally, they say, come and see for yourself in the Holy Land, and we will welcome you to introduce you to where and how we are living. Anyway, it's a strong document. It's in your list of resources. It's online. It's only 3 pages, and it's worth to keep in front of us, I guess, along with these other statements of Kairos calling for us to respond. I might just say this, the Accra Kairos statement, calling for facing up to the inequities of the world economic system and the military and economic repression that comes from the powerful nations, had an impact on us in Edgewood. And so you can see posted at our front door is the Justice and Peace Covenant. In that covenant, we say, you know, we need to act boldly in response to the Kairos, the crises and opportunities of our time.
Thank you, Dave.
Now, it's
we could easily spend 3 sessions, you know, just on this, the history of Palestinian Christians seeking active solidarity and the disappointments and the chapters of this effort. And we don't have time for that here, but it's important to at least be aware of this history and of the really strong theological foundation that they are bringing and calling for people to respond out of. I'm happy to have a little bit of conversation. I do want to, before we end, just quote some things from the Jewish Voice for Peace statement. But if there are if there's anybody who'd like to respond to this, the Kairos statement, this would be a good time. Okay.
I have one thing, it's not a comment on that, but when I got this email, and I didn't see it till yesterday, because I don't always read my emails as well as I should. And but I really appreciated the fact that you folks are doing this, and I got a chance to join in, at least for 2 of the rounds, and probably be able to get the recording and resources. But yeah, one thought I want to share, and you can take it or leave it, is I'm a facilitator for the Michigan Conference Prophetic Integrity Team and Mission Team. And one of the things that we're supposed to do is provide opportunities for the conference and associations to explore and take on social justice issues. And it seems like if you could share this with the larger body of the Michigan Conference or something like it, it would be really wonderful. If you would, I would make sure our team worked with you on it and provided, you know, if there's any funding needed, we could do that. But it'd really be helpful. We could do it like as a, you know, a separate thing from your conference meetings, or you could do it as a part of them, where you gave aside some hours or a part of the day. Same you could do with the association, because we've done something like that on other issues. But yeah, I just wanted to throw that out because it would be a real gift to the church if you did that.
You got applause from our pastor, Jay. Thank you for bringing that up. Let's definitely be in touch about that. We should look for those kinds of opportunities.
Good.
Well, let me go back and share from the PowerPoint where I have put in just a couple of paragraphs from the Jewish Voice for Peace statement. Okay, share. No, from the current slide. Okay, can everybody see it?
yes.
This is a statement that's on the Jewish Voice for Peace website. Our approach to Zionism. And I realize okay, now I can see it. We have come to see that Zionism was the false and failed answer to the desperately real question many of our ancestors faced of how to protect Jewish lives from murderous anti-Semitism in Europe. While it had many strains historically, the Zionism that took hold and stands today is a settler colonial movement, establishing an apartheid state where Jews have more rights than others. Our own history teaches us how dangerous this can be. Palestinian dispossession and occupation are by design. Zionism has meant profound trauma for generations, systematically separating Palestinians from their homes, land, and each other. Zionism in practice has resulted in massacres of Palestinian people, ancient villages and olive groves destroyed, families who live just a mile away from each other separated by checkpoints and walls, and children holding onto the keys of the homes from which their grandparents were forcibly exiled. Because the founding of the State of Israel was based on the idea of a land without people, Palestinian existence itself is resistance. We are all the more humbled by the vibrancy, resilience, and steadfastness of Palestinian life, culture, and organizing, as it is a deep refusal of a political ideology founded on erasure. And when they put this on the website, they introduced it with this quote, which I think is, I needed to see this today. Solidarity is the political version of love, a statement by a Jewish American feminist named Melanie K. Kantrowitz. I talked with Pastor Liz. I said, did we make a mistake doing this session on Palestine when everybody is so stressed out about the US election? You know, how can we add another huge weight? And then I thought, you know, solidarity is the political form of love. This is an opportunity to love more people. This is an opportunity to express compassion and have a feeling of more people to love actively. And I think that's something that we've been learning from the Black Lives Matter movement in our country, that there is so much to be angry about and so many horrible things that keep happening. But the way to work against it is out of love for the community. And so I felt renewed in believing that this was the right thing to do. There's never a good time, there's never a bad time, there's a right time, and the right time is when it's needed, and it's needed. So that's what we're trying to share is, you know, more ways of understanding and appreciating that sense of commonality and urgency to be active in expressing that understanding. So it's 8:20. So I had aimed to end at 8:15. We're pretty darn close. Does anybody have any closing? Oh, I want to mention the next event is November 11. We're not going to do anything the week of the election. We may still be finding out what the election results are beyond next Wednesday, quite possibly. But we planned that our last session where we talk about advocacy and action would be after the US election, when we would understand better what the political context is that will be going forward. So thank you for participating, and the floor is open if you have any closing comments.
Thank you, Chris.
Yeah, thank you, Chris.
Thank you for coming.
For organizing all of this.
Yeah.
Thank you very
My
much.
pleasure.
Very much. Very much.
Wonderful.
Okay.
Thank you.
Indeed. Yes.
Okay.